Welcome to Let's Talk Sense, the podcast that cuts through the noise and gets straight to the heart of what's really going on. Each month, we dive into a different topic, from SAND and current events to the trends shaping our world. We're here to share different perspectives, offer honest insights, and have conversations that truly make sense of it all. Let's talk sense. I am beyond ecstatic this evening to share with you a valued colleague of mine. Um, I'm not going to tell you his name as yet. I just want to share some things about him. He's an award-winning author, an educator of more than 3 decades, an actor, and a poet. And we're going to talk a little bit about his book. It's The Pathology of a Pandemic. And listen up, it has won the International Impact Book Awards in 2024. Now, he's a language and literature teacher. He has taught in the States. He has taught in Jamaica. He has taught in Canada. He loves good food. He's a bit of a fashionista as well, and we're going to talk about that. My guest goes by, let me tell you the initials, CL. And you might think of a Caribbean writer with those first two initials. But this evening, today, I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking with my friend, my colleague, Canute Lawrence. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Samuel Jeffrey. Thank you so much. I feel like a star. I feel like I feel like a celebrity, or should I say celebrity?
Really?
You know what? I have my glass of white wine, so I am a celebrity.
You are, and quite deservedly so. You know, it's quite a far move from your humble beginnings. And I want us to start there. Tell me a little bit about where you were born, and what life was like for you as little Canute.
So I was born in Barbican, Kingston, Jamaica. Um, my father and my mother, and we came from humble beginnings. And then something happened. My father had a medical emergency, a condition, and then it was my grandmother who took me in at I think 3 weeks old. Um, Up to when I was 3 weeks old, my father and my mother separated. They separated. So I was with my father at 3 weeks old. Of course, didn't get much breastfeeding and all of that. And so I grew up with my grandmother because my father was in a coma for weeks. So I grew up with my grandmother in Olympic Gardens. And then when my father came out of the coma, one day, the nurse, I think, was just doing her rounds and then saw my father, sit up in the bed. And so he came out of the coma. And then my grandmother said to my father, since he's already with me, I'll grow him, you don't have to worry, I'll grow him. And so I lived with my grandmother, for throughout my teen years and my early 20s. So, when I was with my grandmother in Olympic Gardens, I attended basic school and then primary school, St. Patrick's Catholic Primary School. Had great memories, fun memories of my years growing up in Olympic Gardens. It was a wonderful time. And then in grade 5, I passed my common entrance exam. I think they're now called PEP, in Jamaica. But at the time, it was common entrance exams. And I passed my common entrance exam for Wolmer's. And it was a big thing to pass for Wolmer's, especially when you're coming from an inner city community. I was living in Mona Heights, or in Hope Pastures, or one of those bougie areas. So I went to Wilma's Boys, and again, that was another chapter of my life that I found very, very interesting, very rewarding. Of course, my years growing up came with a lot of. It was bittersweet because it was when I went to Wilma's, I realized that I was poor because a lot of my peers were the parents had cars, they were chauffeur driven. One of the things that stuck with me, a few of my classmates were chauffeur driven in Mercedes Benz. Chauffeur driven. They had a real chauffeur. And that stuck with me because I realized that I was, financially poor. And when we went on vacation and returned to school, everybody was talking about the flying to Miami and the flew to New York. And of course, I was shut out of the conversation because I didn't want to lie that I went to Miami as well. And so I purposed in my heart from first form at Woolworth, which is, equivalent of grade 7, that I was not going to be poor when I left school. Yeah. So that's a little bit of my growing up years. Yeah.
It's interesting that from such an early point in your life, you said, this is where I came from. This is what I've recognized. This is not where I'm going to remain. And you have traveled quite extensively. You even became a tour guide during some of your journeys. What created this love of travel for you? I mean, you weren't traveling when you were a child. Was it that prompted this desire to travel, or you, what was it?
It was a number of things. It was a number of things. Number one, my classmates at Wilma's, from what I remembered, most of them, it appeared to me, seemed to have traveled. And everybody, so some of them, traveled to Miami, some went to New York, some of them went to England and all of that. And so when they were talking about, their trips, I was very interested. I had an aunt who lived in Washington, D.C., and an uncle who lived in England. And so they would visit Jamaica maybe like every few years. And so when they would visit Jamaica, they would stay at my grandmother's house. And there was something about them that I just loved. They looked like foreigners. They smelled like foreigners. Their accent was beautiful, I thought. And how they described where they lived, I was just intrigued and wanted to know what foreign looked like. And so every time I would see an airplane, I would just make a wish. I would pray that one day I would go on an airplane and get to see what foreign looks like. So I've always been intrigued. Even now, as an adult, I love traveling. I love traveling. I'm always on a plane. I'm always on a plane. I prefer to be able to afford traveling regularly than to have millions of dollars sitting in the bank and not doing anything with it. I love to travel.
So let me ask you this. I do know that you love to travel and you're not bound by the states. You've traveled outside of the United States. Now, one of the places that you traveled to had to do with study. You studied in Madrid. Now, why Madrid? Where did this interest in Spanish come from?
So when I went to Wilma's, and of course, Wilma's Boys High School, the foreign language that was taught and still is taught is Spanish. Always has been Spanish. No other foreign language. And I was always intrigued by this foreign language, always intrigued from first form. And so I always did well in Spanish. In first form, all the way up to fifth form, I was getting 90s, always 90s, 90s, 90s. Yes, I did very well at it, and I think I had a natural knack for Spanish, and so I wanted. And then, of course, I had some fantastic Spanish teachers. I had Miss Sarah Lumena, who was, I know she's deceased. God bless her soul. She was the daughter of one of our former governor generals, or governors general, Sir Florizel Glasspool. I
Hmm.
had another teacher called Dave Rodney. I think he's well known, Dave Rodney. He taught me Spanish for a while. I had some fantastic Spanish teachers. So they gave me this interest and joy in Spanish. And so when I was teaching at Wolmer's, because I went back to my alma mater to teach, and then there were these scholarships that were being given, offered by the Spanish government, by the Ministry of Affairs in the Spanish government. And I applied for one of them and I got it. And I was at Wilmer's at the time. And so I was in Madrid, Spain for 2 months in a summer. It was an advanced course for teachers of Spanish. And I really enjoyed myself in Spain. Fantastic.
Yes, yes. But you have not only, you haven't confined yourself to Europe. You did a bit of tour of the motherland. Tell me about that.
Yes, I visited Africa for the first time in 2019. Visited Africa, particularly Ghana. Went to Ghana. That year they had this big celebration called the Year of the Return, and they invited um, African descendants from North America all over to visit Ghana, and they were also offering citizenship. They were giving people, Ghanaian citizenship. They wanted people to, to return and to open up the country, for persons who wanted to return. And I thought that was a very good initiative. And so I went to Ghana in 2019 and I had a blast. I had a blast. I loved it. Some friends and I went and we just had a wonderful time. Of course, you know, Ghana looks very similar. Well, I should say Jamaica looks very similar to Ghana, quite frankly, because Ghana is a much bigger country. I mean, in terms of the plants, the vegetation, the landscape, very similar. I thought I was in Jamaica, you know. Um, so Ghana, so that was my return to the motherland, and I visited two of the quote slave unquote castles. So they call them slave castles. I don't know why they call them castles because a castle should be something that has great memories. But I went to the slave castles where the enslaved Africans were housed, and that was a very emotional experience. When we went into the dungeons where they kept the enslaved Africans, and you could literally feel the pain. You could smell the urine. You could you it was just horrendous. It was horrendous. When we went on the shores of Ghana and see how violent the waves were and still are, I just can't explain it, but there is something cosmic there. That's all I can say. There is something cosmic, as if the ancestors are still upset at what happened to them, you know. But all in all, it was a wonderful experience for me to go back to Africa in 2019. I went back twice. And I hope to visit again and visit some other African nations.
Yeah. I fully understand the emotion that would have encompassed you because for me, I visited South Africa. And for me, just being on African soil was such a rich experience for me. It made me emotional, and I didn't even get to go to anywhere that had any slave connections,
Yeah.
But I mean, apartheid, yes, but just being on African soil meant a lot to me. And I
Mhm.
think everyone from the diaspora should have that experience of returning.
Yeah.
because there's a motif of your feet touching the ground, and the vibration, the connection with the soil is so powerful. It really ignites something within you. And I think we should all have that experience, of making that connection. You have spoken about being at Wolmer's, having fantastic teachers. Did this in any way encourage you, inspire you to attend the Michael?
Initially, no. Because when you go to when you attend a Wolmer's high school, yeah, um, you're thinking of you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, be a Rhodes Scholar, an engineer, a dentist, one of those so-called, you know, classical professions. So of
Mhm.
course, when I was in third form, um, our guidance counselor at the time, Mrs. Chevans,
Mhm.
we got some
Sonia
forms.
Shevans.
Yes, yes, we got some forms to fill out, and we had to put the subjects that we were going to take in fourth form, which is grade 10, and we had to write the three professions in order of choice, preference that we wanted. Of course, most of my friends want to become doctors. So of course, me eggs up too, because I go, oh, do this like a black boy from Waterhouse. So my first choice was a doctor. Of course, I could have been a doctor if I wanted to. I chose medicine, and my second choice was dentistry. And my third choice was nurse, because, of course, at the time I was reading a lot, and there was a need for male nurses in Jamaica as well as abroad. So I chose those three. Sanya, they had a field trip. Mr. Barnes organized a field trip. And so all the students who chose medical professions or medical related professions, they took us on a field trip down to Kingston Public Hospital. Everybody excited. I'm excited because I'm with all of the brainy kids. I mean, I was in one of the top four, by the way.
Yes.
When we reach Kingston Public Hospital and smell the hospital smell, or it smell like Dettol, or it smell like antiseptic, or it smell like death, a piece of bad feelings take me. Sanya, a piece of bad feelings take me. Me I try fight the feeling, and the feeling not the feeling of beat me, because I not win. I was not winning. Okay. And I started to throw up. So I threw up, and when after I threw up and all of that, and then I fainted. I fainted, yes, fainted. Them have to call the school, and them have to call taxi and all kind of excitement, and they shipped me back to Wolmer's. So I'm happy that that experience happened, because I realized that I don't think I was ready for that. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready for it. And I can't stand the sight of blood. Um, I just can't. So I know if I go into the medical profession, I would have had to cope and see blood all the time. Nurses, see blood. Dentists see blood. Everybody that see blood. And so I realized that I never have the constitution for it. Even sometimes when I kill cockroach, when me kill them, I kind of feel bad. So me slap the clap out of them. But it is what it is. You understand? Yes. So, um, I veered away from that. I wanted to then pursue law, because all my friends said, Canute, you talk a lot, and you make a very good lawyer. But of course, um, I didn't want to burden my father. I didn't want to burden my grandmother. And so I knew that I would have to do my first degree and then go to law school and then to sit the bar. And you know, I was discouraged, because I know that they never had the money. So I saw an ad in the papers. It was fifth form. So fifth form is here. Did all my CXC subjects, got my results, passed all my subjects, and then I didn't know what to do. I mean, I didn't want to go to sixth form. I didn't want to go to sixth form, quite frankly, and I didn't want to work. I didn't want to work. I wasn't sure, where my life was going, being a 16-year-old. And then I saw an ad in the Star that Michael College at the time had space for more prospective teachers, student teachers. And I also saw that they needed Spanish and English teachers. So I went to Michael the following day with the little slip that I passed my subjects. When I went to Michael, I went to the registrar. The lady said to me, she said, "You have all your subjects, but you're very young." I said, "I know." I said, but I still passed my subject. And she said you couldn't be at least 17 because she said, it's 18 to get into Michael. But I was 16. And I was just trying to convince her, and then she was very hard and fast. And then Mr. Shirley, the principal, was passing by, and she stopped her and she said, "Mr. Shirley, this young man is only 16, but he has all his subjects." And Mr. Shirley looked at me, looked at my subjects, and told her to call Senora. They called her Senora. She was the head of the Spanish department at Michael. And Senora came down, a big, burly woman. She was Cuban, and she was very big and heavy set. And she looked very intimidating. Of course, me at 16, made it very skinny, made it very mager. And so he told her to interview me in Spanish to see if I was really good. And she interviewed me in Spanish, and Sonia, Spanish I spoke. I spoke, I spoke in Spanish. And I was very good. And when she finished interviewing me, Mr. Shirley asked her, if, how did I do? And she said, he's actually pretty good, Mr. Sir. He's very pretty good. And then Mr. Shirley just said to the registrar, enroll him, enroll him. So I was enrolled, and I became a student at the Michael College. Now, the
16
Michael University College.
the college at 16. That's
At
quite a
16,
feat.
made it young, green, green, green.
You know, how did that fare out for you? A young 16-year-old entering college to do education.
Yes.
How, what how did that shape your life?
You know what? It shaped my life in marvelous ways because number one, I was very young. I was 16. And at Michael, of course, most of the students were 18 and over. There were students who were in their 30s, their 40s, and 50s. And so what that did for me, it matured me fast because I could not behave like a 16-year-old, like a teenager. It made me act like an adult because I'm at teachers college. So it made me reflect on who I was at the time and where I was going. And I didn't want persons at the college to look at me as a 16-year-old and to treat me like a child. So I acted like an adult. And because of that too, I did not live on campus because I didn't want them to grub me and to do all of those things to me because I was very young. You understand? So I lived off campus for the first 2 years. And in my final year, when I was 19, in my final year when I was 19, I lived on campus.
Yeah. So you had the opportunity of being a little bit in both worlds, teenager, but living with the older persons who could have helped to mold you and your
Yes,
perspective on life.
yes.
Who would you say were some of the persons who influenced you and your worldview while you were at the Michael?
Um, my friends, my friends, and a few of the professors, but my friends. I had some wonderful friends at Michael. They were older than me, and I made sure to stick around the persons who were much older than me. But I can recall Judith Jones. I don't know. I think she's in England right now. We were very, very good friends, and I think she lives in England. Judith Jones. There was Denise Jarrett now, Dr. Denise Jarrett, professor at Morgan State University. There is Luke Williams. Luke Williams is also a well-respected, highly respected teacher in London, England. Um, in terms of my professors, I had Miss Mavis Smith, I think she's deceased. I think all my professors, I believe, are now deceased. But Micah was a great experience for me. Much even better than when I went to University of West Indies. When I went to UWE was no comparison. I thought UWE would have been so rigorous and hard. I had a vision of UWE, University of West Indies, for those persons who are listening on the podcast, that when I left university, I would be this scholar. I would be so erudite that I couldn't even fart. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. No, no, seriously. In my young mind, I thought when I went to university, it would make me so bright, so erudite, so this and so that. You was nothing. I learned most of what I learned was from Michael, and and a lot of the literature courses in English that I took at UWE, I did them at Michael. And so I had all my Michael notes, and I used my Michael notes, and I wrote my essays, and I passed. Like I got like B's and A's. So my Michael years were also foundational, and that was where I think most of my my long lasting relationships, because a lot of the friends that I currently have, they went to Michael, and we are still friends. I can talk about Peaches Williams, who lives in England, you know, Luke Williams, and there is Denise Jarrett. Most of my friends now, we went to Michael. So Michael played a significant and pivotal role in my educational development, physical development, social, socially and otherwise. Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael.
One of the things that comes through um, my knowledge of you and talking to you is loyalty and friendship and relationships. Because I've often seen you at your reunions, school reunions, and making contact with friends. But not only that, there's a strong sense of, as I said, loyalty and the importance of mentoring. Why is that so important to you?
It's important to me, Sonia, because I was a little boy who grew up poor. I I grew up with insecurities because, as you can all see, I'm a dark-skinned chocolate brother. And when I was growing up, I did not like my color. I've said it to many persons before. I only shared this, I think, maybe during or a little during the pandemic, but it's something that I never really spoke about.
Mhm.
Because, when I was, growing up in Jamaica, and I saw a lot of images on TV, and especially in foreign film and stuff, and it didn't, I saw very few black people, even on Jamaican TV, you know, growing up. And so the message that I got from that was that being dark skinned was not something that is good. That's what I got. Yeah. You look at the ads, the television ads, it's mostly light skinned people. So I didn't like the fact that I was dark skinned. I didn't like the fact that my hair was kinky. I didn't like the fact. And I remember in the 80s, I tried jerry curling my hair multiple times. I would let the cream stay in my hair for longer than what was recommended because I wanted to get my hair curly. And when I washed out the cream, my hair came out the same way, and I thought I had bad hair. So, a lot of these experiences, I thought were, they're a little bit bitter, you know? And like I said, I didn't like the fact that I was dark skinned, but I have over the years learned to accept my skin color, accept my heritage, accept my Africanness, and it has been a work in progress. It has been a work in progress.
It's interesting. You used a word. You spoke about being bitter, but I have a quotation where you've spoken about the fact that when you get disappointments, you've said, don't be bitter because something better is going to come. Oh, how did you arrive at that idea? Don't be bitter, something better is going to come.
So I was invited to Jamaica to present at a festival. And I was communicating with the festival organizer, all of that, through email. And the person even called me on the phone. And then I purchased my ticket and everything, organized myself. And so before I got to Jamaica, I messaged the person, the organizer, I sent messages, text, email, and the person did not respond. I just wanted confirmation. And I said, when I get to Jamaica and when I get to the venue, with whom do I speak? Who's the contact person there? And I got no response. So I sent a bit like not scathing, but I sent a very strong voice note to say, I wish you would respond to my messages because I mean, we are adults. And the person responded and said to me, "Oh, you're not on. You weren't selected." And I said, "Huh? I wasn't. But you told me that I was down to on the billboard. Anyway, yes, I was very disappointed. I was very hurt and all of that. And then it was a day, was it the same day? The same day. The same day I got an email that I won the International Impact Book Award the same day. So of course, just how that happened, I realized that yes, we will have disappointments in our lives. We will have disappointments in our lives. Everything will not always go as planned, but I've also learned that with disappointments, we may not be able to see the good ahead, but there is always better. There is always better. And I have accepted that. I've accepted that, So I still went to Jamaica and I wasn't bitter anymore. I went to the festival. I showed up. And I was there in my finery, and the organizer saw me and everything. And the festival was just so.
It's interesting that sometimes things that we think we need turn out to be things that we can do without.
Yeah.
And we grow through these experiences because we had the pandemic. Life changed completely for everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
it created an opportunity for quite a number of people. And for you, it created the opportunity to publish what you have identified as my first book, which suggests that there are other books in the offing. But before
Yeah.
we talk about your future plans, tell us a little bit about your book. Why that title? And I must say, I have read some of your poems and I am having a belly full of laugh.
Oh,
I'm,
really?
I'm enjoying it. And so thank you very much for that. But the pathology of a pandemic, pun alliteration. Tell me a little bit about how you came up with the idea of that title and why and what your poems are about.
So so first I talk about what the poems are about. So because the title came afterwards. So I wrote the poems during the pandemic because um I didn't know we didn't know what was going on. We knew there was this disease, this pandemic. Up to the March, April, May of 2020, we didn't know how this thing was even being spread. We didn't know. And so, you can recall we were all in a state of, some people were in a state of panic, internal panic, whatever. People were going to stores and just grabbing up toilet paper. I was never in any of that because I didn't see the need. I just didn't, I kept wondering, why the rush for toilet paper? I didn't see the connection anyway. Um, so I wrote my poems and I would share them because from writing the poems was cathartic.
Gotcha.
Writing the poems for me was therapeutic because I needed an outlet to just express myself. So I never thought of publishing at all. And then I would share the poems now with a few friends, and they said, Canute, these poems are good. And I'm like, no, they're not. They said, Canute, these poems are, I said, no, they're not. So what I did, I tested them out, the first few, and I read them on Facebook Live because everybody was going live because, to feel connected. And then I just kept getting more followers and more followers and more followers, and people telling me the poems are wonderful, the poems are great. It's helping them to process what's going on. They're able, it expresses what they want to say but couldn't. And people were telling me, oh, Canute, when are you coming back on again? When are you coming back on again? So there was a pressure now to keep writing. And so I wrote. And then one of my good friends again from Michael University, who is a professor, the same Dr. Denise Jarrett, said to me, Canute, you need to publish those poems. I said, no, Denise, I mean, they're not. She said, Canute, your poems are good. If I'm a literature professor, and I would not be telling you to publish and putting my name on the line if they weren't good. And it took some convincing of hers. And she said, Canute, don't let me just jump on a plane and come over to Toronto and deal with you. And I realized she was serious. So I published. I published. And but before that, the title, because pathology, I wanted something to kind of sound literary because I'm an English teacher. I'm a teacher of literature. So I wanted something that had a literary flair. And so I used pathology because I had several titles, by the way, but pathology is really the study of communicable diseases. And this is exactly what COVID-19 was, and well, still is. So I chose pathology of a pandemic. So you got the alliterative element there, and also the punning of pathology. How, in other words, how did these poems about the pandemic come about? And so that was the title, Pathology of a Pandemic.
Quite creative, and your creativity is not just in your writing, it's also in other aspects of your life. And I want you to talk to us a little bit about what you have done on stage and behind the scenes. You are a national, well, I can say an international actor. Talk us through, help us to make sense of that aspect of your life.
Oh Lord, that's I started performing from I was in primary school, yeah. And then when I went to Wolmer's, I was in the drama club. All the years I was at Wolmer's, I was in the drama club. I performed at the Inter-Secondary Schools Drama Festival. And then when I went to Michael, I did some acting at Michael as well. We had this pantomime during Michael's, I think, 150th year celebration. And the college actually commissioned um, the late Barbara Gludon, I think she's OJ, to write, this pantomime called Michael Jackson. So I was punning on Michael Jackson, this young man who came from humble beginnings, went to Michael and became a big thing. Michael Jackson, like Michael Jackson.
Jackson,
So,
yeah.
and it was Luke Williams who played the titular role of Michael Jackson, the same Luke Williams who lives in England and who is a fantastic people. And then I played the role of Mr. Shirley, the principal, the same one who got me into Michael when he said enroll him. So I acted in Michael. I was in the drama club there, and then I auditioned for the National Pantomime of Jamaica, and I got in. And so I performed in about 7 pantomimes in leading roles and in supporting roles.
Yeah.
I have been in several commercial plays, from Michael Record play to Aston Cook, the late Aston Cook. I've to Carl Hart. I've been in a lot of plays in Jamaica. I even did a little stint not off Broadway, off Broadway. I did a little stint in off Broadway, and that was wonderful. So and I've all in Toronto, Canada here, I have acted in a few plays. I mean, several plays, but actually, and I've also directed quite a few plays in Toronto, Canada. So I have contributed in many ways, to community theatre and commercial theatre. Yeah.
Would you ever give up the classroom for the stage?
Well, you know what? Right now, I need my pension, so I will have to stay and get my good pension in the next 6 years. But when I retire in the next 6 years, I I will have a lot to do. I don't want to be going to the same job every day. I find that
Mhm.
boring right now. But when I retire, for sure, I may be, may be a visiting professor. I may do a little bit of acting, some voice work. I will have the freedom to do other things. Yeah, I'll have the freedom to do other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Teaching is a very teaching is a very demanding job. Quite frank, teaching is a demanding job. I get to work like 7:30 in the mornings, prepare my lesson plans, prepare my classroom, all of that, do some marking, and when I teach because I'm very dramatic. You know, I incorporate a lot of drama in my classroom to ensure the kids are engaged. When 3:15 comes, I leave because I'm tired. Yeah, I used to stay back like for hours doing all kinds of things, but I'm 58, I'm not going to continue doing that. I have to kind of slow down a little bit. And home, when I get home, I don't check email, work email. I don't mark papers. I don't look at any of that. I just go in my couch and I relax and make some dinner. I watch some TV. I go on social media. I watch some reels. That's what I do to maintain a good and a balanced mental health.
Yeah. You spoken about the fact that teaching is demanding, but in some ways, teaching can be ungrateful.
Yes.
Is it just the pension that has caused you to remain in teaching?
Well, I mean, I do love teaching. I do love teaching. When I was thrust into it, and I think teaching chose me because I remember when I was in fifth form and we were preparing for our CXC exams, and so I was one of the students. We would have these things called matter shop. And so we would have these little study groups. And so if you were very good at math, you would be the one leading the math study group or matter shop. So I was leading the Spanish matter shop, geography matter shop, English, and I think and geography. Yeah. So and my friends always said, I said, Canute, you explain things so simply and we understand, we understand. Then I that me still try explain to it before. So I kind of found out that I would make a really very good teacher because I have the ability to explain things, to break things down in a way that persons could understand. So I knew it, but I didn't want to tell my friends I want to become a teacher. I didn't, because I mean, a teacher, even though it is said it's a noble profession, I wanted something that would offer me more money because, again, I grew up in Waterhouse. My family, they were working class people, and I wanted to kind of, to get into a profession that would give me much more money. That's how young people think, right? So I didn't choose teaching, but teaching chose me. So, but over the years, I mean, I have always loved teaching since I started. A lot of my former students said, sir, you did something, you said something to me that changed who I was and, impacted who I am today. I've got and heard those stories almost on a regular. So I do love teaching, but right at this juncture, I guess because I'm excited about retiring, I think I'm excited because it's no longer 2 digits, it's 1 digit. And so I'm looking forward to leaving because I want to take on new initiatives. I want to write my memoirs. Oh yes, I want to write my memoirs because I find that when I teach, I can't do much writing. I just can't because my mind is so occupied. But and that is what the pandemic allowed me to do during all of that free time. I was able to write. So I have a lot more poetry that I have not published. Am I eager to publish them? Not necessarily, but I do want to write my memoirs while I'm doing other things. And one of the things I want to do is to, maybe do a part-time lecturing at a college or university.
I want to touch on two things. Growing up in Waterhouse, I want us to go back to that, but I also want to touch on the you've had students tell you that you've inspired them, and I think when you went to Ghana, you had a former student of yours who went with you.
Yeah, yes,
Right.
yes.
So, and I want to explore the idea of mentoring a little bit more. You know, um, you've inspired students. You've had this former student of yours go on a trip to the motherland, and I saw the relationship that you both had, and it was quite positive. It was a real bond that you had. How has the how has your pouring into others impacted you and others?
Well, it has impacted me in marvelous ways because I think in life it's not about how much money you have, how much and how many cars you have, how many mansions you have. It's how you impact people. And so I know I've impacted many students. And so that for me is riches. That for me is wealth. When you can impact a human life in positive ways. You know, I've had students who, who were suicidal, who had suicidal thoughts. And just because I took the time to listen to them, not to judge them, because a lot of us in Jamaica, in Jamaica, we love to judge, because Jamaica is supposed to be a very religious country and has so many churches per
Yes,
capita square
amen.
mile,
Mhm.
and we use the Bible to beat people with. And I don't think that is effective. I've had students in school who they said that they were different. They said that they felt different, and they felt comfortable enough to come to me and confide in me how they were feeling, what thoughts were going through their head. I've had students who, even right here in Canada, who came to me and told me that, they attempted, suicide. And I never looked in them much in shock and said, how could you? The Bible says, and don't. Because that is how I think a lot of Jamaicans are, quite frankly. And um, I've been able to change students, their mindset. And so for that, I feel very proud. I feel as if, God is using me, the God or the universe is using me in ways to make positive changes in people's lives. I think that's one of the most important things, one of the most powerful things we can ever do. So even though I may not be the Prime Minister of Canada, I may not be the Prime Minister of Jamaica, I may not be, one of the top 100 influential people in Canada or Jamaica or the world or be on Time magazine, but I do know that in my world, I'm making a tremendous impact on my students. Yeah.
That's powerful because it doesn't matter what profession or vocation you enter into, it all starts with a teacher. So your life is purposeful. Now, did you ever imagine, or let me rephrase that. How is it that you did not fall into the traps that other youth who came from Olympic Gardens and those areas fell into? What was it that caused you to stay on the straight and narrow?
Um, that's a very good question. I grew up in Olympic Gardens where my area was extremely volatile, especially in 1980, when I think that year
Sure.
hundreds of people were killed in political violence. I was selected by one of the parties, I won't say which one, to to, to carry guns. I was. I actually held a gun. But I don't know if if I was afraid. I think I was afraid. And I think I was a coward, to be honest with you. I didn't want to go that route, even though I had access to guns, and I could have joined the other young boys and just start shooting up places. But of course, I saw other young men on both sides who died, and I did not want that for my life. I wanted more. I wanted more. I really wanted more. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be somebody. I really did. And then I had a grandmother. I had a grandmother who was very strict. So I could not take up gun violence, knowing who my grandmother was, because she would have whipped the skin off my back. Yeah, that was my grandmother. So it was a number of factors. I was going to Wolmer's High School. I didn't want to be a gunman going to Wolmer's High School. I didn't want that. I didn't want that for me. I wanted to make my sister proud. I wanted to make my father proud. I wanted to make my other relatives proud. I wanted to make me proud. So the gun thing, I had to tell him that, I didn't, I'm okay. I was okay. So that was how I did not take up gunmanship, but I could. But it was not for me. And I'm glad I didn't take it up, because if I did, I don't think I'd be here, quite frankly. If I took up that lifestyle, I know I would not be here. Because if I did, I would have been ruthless. If I did, I would have been ruthless.
We
Yeah.
are happy you didn't. And looking back on your life, what would you have said to young Canute? If you were able to talk to young Canute, what would you have said to him?
Why, Canute? Don't give up. Don't give up. You are a good looking, smart, handsome, capable young man. You will be somebody. Just continue doing what you're doing, because you will reap the benefits one day. That would have been, that's what I would say to my young self, my younger self.
Mhm.
Yeah. Love yourself, and love your black skin, love your hair, love your big lips, your big juicy lips, love everything about you, because you are gorgeous.
Yeah. It's so important for us to have positive self-talk. And I don't know, that's something that we grew up on. Nowadays, a lot of positive affirmations are being parlayed, and quite often you hear people telling young black children, "You're beautiful, you're smart, you're enough. You don't need to copy anybody. Be yourself." So I'm so happy that you've spoken those words. Love yourself. Um, what would you say is your greatest achievement to date?
Wow, I've had so many. I've had so many. Okay, I'll have to mention a few. Writing a book, publishing a book that became a bestseller, that won an
Yes.
international award. I don't need no more award. I don't need any more to validate me. Um, all the persons who have bought my books have said, "Canute, you have a great book." I'm completing my master's degree during the pandemic. That was another great achievement, because I didn't want to do it online, but I did, because I needed something to keep my mind off the pandemic, quite frankly. So I made the choice to do a master's in adult education, um, in educational leadership and management. And I did that during the pandemic, and I got honors for that master's. So that was another achievement. Um, I have, there's just so many other things. Another achievement is having the friends that I have. Having the friends that I have, you know, that's priceless. That's an achievement, because many persons who are wealthy and famous, then they're lonely. They're lonely. They have the wealth and the money, but they're lonely. They don't know who to trust. You know, they you know, they do they do, I don't want to say it like that. They take their own lives. I don't want to take my life, you know. So having good friends, having good family is to me also a great achievement. So those are just maybe three of my accomplishments. Because I don't want to dwell on material things. I don't want to dwell on material things, you know. Um, but things that I think are worthy, like, completing my master's and possibly going for my PhD, writing a book, and my friends. I think those are some wonderful accomplishments that I can truly boast about. Yeah.
Yeah. I I'm happy that you've spoken about your friends because quite often in today's society we have followers and we don't know them. They only know the persona that we put out. But your
Yes.
friends who have known you for a long time know the real you, and that is really important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Canute, we've spoken about being honest, and you've spoken quite sincerely about who you are, your humble beginnings and so forth. How do you make sense of where you are now based on where you have come from?
Still trying to figure it out, quite frankly. I would, still trying to figure it out. I think about myself. I think about my existence in this world. I think about my purpose in this world. And if I'm really fulfilling my purpose, I think I'm fulfilling my purpose to some extent. You know, I think about, I try to make sense of the world and I think about when my time comes. I do. I think about, when I will make the transition and what lies beyond, and I don't know. Yes, I grew up in a church. I was baptized as Roman Catholic, and then of course became a Pentecostal. Right now I'm nothing. I still consider myself a Christian, but I don't hold myself or affiliate myself with any particular denomination. I think I'm more a spiritual person. Going back to Africa, so I know there's a God. I know there's a supreme being, but I'm not going to say Christianity or Islam or Buddhism. Um, I'm still trying to understand the universe, quite frankly. I'm still trying, you know. I Of course, we were taught that, after death, comes the resurrection, and nobody can prove it. It's just what we believe. It's in the Christian faith. And so my thing is, when I get to that point, I hope I will have the opportunity to repent again and make my restitution, whatever, with Jesus Christ, if Jesus Christ does exist, and try to do it as sincerely as possible, because it's one or two things. It can either exist or don't exist. So I think I want to say that let me believe that it exists, because if it doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist. I won't lose. But if it exists, then at least I'll get to be in the kingdom of God. But to be again, without wanting to blaspheme or anything like that, I'm still trying to figure that out. And so what I do, I try to live my life in a way. I'm not perfect, but I try to be the Christian human being. I try to be like Christ. Am I successful all the time? No, because I have my faults and my flaws. But I try to help people all the time. Even during with the Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, I have helped quite a few persons because I want to make sure that my money that I send is going to persons specifically. I have not donated any money to any charitable organizations, and that was deliberate. So the money that I have, I invested that money, and I call up different people that I know who live in the western end, who lost their homes, and I send them the money through Western Union directly. Will I put that on social media or post it and take pictures? No, no, I don't think so. You know, that should remain like that. You know, a lot of people are posting of what they're doing and showing the faces of the persons whom they're donating to. You know, I think people, you know, need a little dignity as well in their hour of distress, because I can't imagine, you know, losing your entire home, you know. So I try to live my life helping others. I help a lot of people, you know, with scholarships. And I love to help. I love helping people. So I do that. I do that. And hopefully, you know, that is how I also want to impact the lives of other people so that when they reach to my level, they can also pay it forward and help some other people who are less fortunate. Yeah.
You are definitely a man for all seasons. Canute, I have thoroughly enjoyed our talk. You've shared so much of who you are, so much of what you've done, shown so much of people you've inspired and things that you have you want to do. I am, you know, we spoke about being honest, we spoke about offering different perspectives and having conversations that truly make sense. And as we were winding down, one of the things that I hope my listeners will look at and appreciate is the fact that you are still coming to terms with your relationship with God, and you're honest enough to say, I haven't truly figured it out as yet, but I know that there is something there, and I remember my background, my grandmother's influence on my life, and I think that's where most people are, coming from the Caribbean. There's a strong sense, strong connection to God, and even if they're in the valley of indecision, they are thinking about it, and I think that is wonderful. You are a complete gentleman. We have the author, we have the friend, the mentor, the educator, the I mean, he didn't even get to talk about your cuisine and your fashion and your sense of style, your the debonair, the
You have to do
suave.
you have to do a part two. You have to do a part
We
two. You have to do
we
a part
we
two.
will come back. We will come back and have another chat with you. But it has certainly been my joy to share my friend Canute with my listeners, and I know that they will be checking out your pathology of the pandemic of a pandemic, and it's at Amazon. Lovely. You will enjoy reading it, and I want you to go out. Yeah, I'm making a plug for him. Go out, purchase your copy, and enjoy not only the conversation we've had, but his writings. You will be blown away. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, my colleague,
Yes, yes, yes.
Agikwana gets to the world.
I get quite a guess. Whatever you do it
Do
well.
do it exactly. You know, Canute Lawrence. Thank you very much for being my guest, Canute. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners, I'm so sorry that we have to stop now, but we've had a beautiful conversation with Canute, and I am so grateful for this episode of Let's Talk Sense. Thanks so much for joining us and being a part of this very important conversation. And I hope that you'll be back to see us, to listen us, to hear, and to be a part of another conversation. You won't want to miss it. Until next time, keep keep the conversation going. Let's talk